The night was cold and silent. The small human farm stood alone on the edge of a frozen valley. Inside the metal house, David sat near the dim heater. His hands were rough from work, his face tired from another long day. He lived alone, far from the cities, far from noise. The only sound in his home was the soft hum of the heater and the wind scratching against the walls. David had chosen this lonely life. After losing his family in the war, he wanted nothing more than peace. People had disappointed him, governments had used him, and war had taken everything else. Here only the land demanded his strength, and the land at least was honest. He was just about to close his eyes when he heard it. Knock. Knock. The sound was soft, almost too soft. At first he thought it was the wind hitting the door. But then it came again, slow, weak but clear. Knock, knock. David froze. Nobody ever came to his farm. His land was too far, too forgotten. For a second he thought maybe it was a trick. Bandits maybe, or soldiers who wanted to claim his supplies. His heart started to beat faster. He stood slowly, his heavy boots scraping the floor. His hand reached for the old rifle leaning against the wall. He had not used it in months, but his fingers still knew the shape of it well. Quietly he moved toward the door. "Who's there?" His voice was low and sharp. No answer. The wind hissed outside, carrying only silence. David's eyes narrowed. He placed his ear close to the cold metal door. That was when he heard it. A voice, weak, trembling, barely a whisper. "Please, help me." It was not a man's voice. It was soft, tired, almost broken. For a moment David thought maybe it was his mind playing tricks. But then he heard it again, faint and desperate. "Please." He felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from something else. He pulled the rifle closer, unlocked the heavy door, and opened it just enough to see. The sight made him pause. Standing in the snow was not a human. It was a woman, but not from Earth. Her skin was pale with a faint silver glow. Her eyes were large, reflecting the moonlight like liquid glass. Her clothes were torn and thin, not enough to fight the cold. She looked weak, fragile, like a flower beaten by storm. David's first thought was danger. Aliens were not rare in the galaxy, but they were rarely friendly. Wars had been fought between humans and many other races. Some traded, some tolerated, but few ever trusted. And here was one of them, standing at his door in the middle of the night. He raised his rifle, his voice hard. "What do you want?" The alien woman did not move. She did not reach for a weapon. Instead, she bowed her head, her breath white in the freezing air. "Food. Warmth," she whispered. "Just a little," her voice cracked. She looked ready to fall. David's fingers stayed tight on the trigger. His mind told him she could be lying. She could be bait. But his heart saw something else. The way her knees trembled. The way her hands shook as she tried to keep standing. She was not a soldier. She was not a hunter. She was just lost. The snow swirled harder, pushing against her fragile frame. If he closed the door now, she would not last an hour. For a long moment, David said nothing. The silence stretched heavy between them. His eyes studied her, every twitch, every breath. He was searching for any sign of threat, but there was none. Only desperation. Finally, with a sharp breath, he lowered his rifle. "Get inside." The alien woman's head lifted slowly. Her eyes widened as if she could not believe what she heard. For a moment she didn't move, almost afraid it was a cruel trick. But then weakly she stepped forward. Her body shivered as she crossed the doorway. David shut the door quickly behind her, locking out the storm. The warmth of the heater touched her skin and she gasped, like someone who had been drowning and finally found air. She almost collapsed, but David caught her by the arm. Her skin was colder than ice, yet soft, too soft. He guided her to the chair near the heater. "Sit," he said gruffly. She obeyed, curling up near the weak heat. Her eyes closed for a second, as if she might sleep right there. But then she opened them and whispered again, "Thank you." Her voice was still weak, but now there was something else in it. Relief. Hope. David stood there, his rifle still in hand, watching her closely. He did not trust her, not yet. But something inside him had moved, something he thought he had buried long ago. For the first time in many years, David's quiet, empty home was not empty anymore, and outside, in the cold, dark night, the wind carried secrets he could not yet see. The unexpected knock was only the beginning. The alien woman sat close to the heater, her arms wrapped tight around herself. The silver glow of her skin reflected softly in the dim light. Steam rose faintly from her clothes as the cold melted away. For a long time, neither of them spoke. David stood across the room, his rifle still in his hands. His eyes never left her. He did not trust easily, not anymore. But something about her silence kept him curious. She did not look like a soldier. She did not look like a thief. She looked broken. At last, David broke the silence. His voice was steady but sharp. "Who are you? And why are you here?" The woman lifted her head slowly. Her large eyes blinked, heavy with exhaustion. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The words came out soft, almost a whisper. "My name is Soraya." Her voice was strange, almost musical, but weak. She looked down at her trembling hands before continuing. "I walked for days. No food, no fire. I had nothing left. I only saw light from your house. And I knocked." David narrowed his eyes. Her words sounded honest, but honesty was rare these days. He had heard lies from generals, from leaders, from strangers who smiled while holding knives behind their backs. He knew better than to trust too quickly. Still, her voice carried something no soldier could fake. Pain. David poured water into a tin cup and set it in front of her. She hesitated for a moment, as if she did not know whether it was safe, then took it with trembling fingers. She drank slowly, carefully, like every drop was precious. For a while, the room was quiet again. The wind howled outside, but inside there was only the soft crackle of the heater. Finally, Soraya spoke again. "My people, we are dying," David frowned. "Dying?" She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Our race can no longer give birth. For many cycles, no child has been born. No new life. Only silence. Whole families fading away. Whole villages turning to dust." Her words hung heavy in the air. David felt something stir inside him. Loneliness he knew well. Loss he understood. But the thought of an entire race unable to continue, it was something far darker. Soraya lowered her head. "Those like me, the barren ones, we are seen as useless, a burden. Some are abandoned, some are sent away." David tightened his grip on his rifle. "And they sent you away?" She shook her head. "No, I left. I wanted to live. Even if I am empty inside, I still want to live." Her voice cracked on the last word. For a moment she seemed less like an alien and more like a wounded bird, fragile, tired, but still fighting to breathe. David studied her carefully. He wanted to ask more, but part of him didn't want to know. He had built his life far from people for a reason. He had no space for secrets, no patience for strange stories, and yet, here she was, sitting in his home, carrying a secret heavier than anything he had heard in years. He tried to harden his voice. "Why come here? Why me?" Soraya looked up at him. Her silver eyes shimmered, reflecting both fear and hope. "Because you opened the door." The word struck him harder than he expected. Simple, direct, and true. David looked away, his jaw tight. He was not a savior. He was not a hero. He was just a man who had lost too much and wanted to be left alone. Yet here he was with an alien woman sitting in his home, her secret bleeding into his silence. The heater crackled louder, filling the space between them. Soraya pulled her thin blanket tighter and whispered almost to herself. "Humans. I was told you were dangerous, cold, but you are not like the others." David almost laughed, but it came out more like a bitter breath. "Dangerous? Cold?" They were right. I am both. But Soraya only shook her head weakly. "No. You opened the door." Her words kept circling in his mind long after she closed her eyes and drifted into restless sleep. David sat back in his chair, rifle across his lap, staring into the faint glow of the heater. He should not care. He should throw her out by morning. She was trouble, he could feel it, and yet something in his chest whispered otherwise. Something he had buried years ago. Something he did not want to feel again. Compassion. The night stretched on, heavy and long. Outside, the wind screamed across the valley. But inside that small farm, a secret had entered, carried by a fragile stranger, a secret that would change everything. And as David finally closed his eyes, he knew one thing. The knock on his door had not been chance. It was the beginning of something he could not escape. Morning came slow on the frozen planet. The weak sun climbed over the horizon, casting pale light across the valley. The storm had passed, but the air was still sharp and cold. David rose early as always. Habit had kept him alive. He brewed his bitter coffee, ate a small piece of bread, and prepared for another day of work. But this morning was different. For the first time in years, he was not alone in the house. Soraya still slept near the heater, curled in the blanket he had given her. Her breathing was soft, almost silent. Her silver skin glowed faintly under the dim light, as if she belonged to some other world entirely. She looked fragile, almost breakable, yet something about her presence filled the empty room with an energy he had forgotten. David studied her quietly. He did not know why he had let her in. Maybe because she knocked, maybe because he had grown tired of silence, or maybe because deep down he still carried a piece of the man he used to be, the man who cared. He shook the thought away and stepped outside. The ground was still frozen, the crops struggling under the cold. He worked as he always did, his hands moving with practiced rhythm. But halfway through chopping wood, he noticed something strange. The door creaked open, and Soraya stepped outside. Her steps were slow, unsteady, but her eyes were wide as she looked at the endless stretch of white fields. She pulled the blanket tighter around her thin frame, watching David silently. "You should stay inside," David said without looking up. "It's too cold." "I wanted to see," she replied softly. "Your land. It is quiet. Empty, but alive." David gave a short laugh. "Alive? You call frozen dirt alive?" Soraya tilted her head, her strange eyes glimmering. "Alive because you keep it alive. Every seed you plant, every breath you take here. You fight the silence. That is life." David paused, his axe frozen mid-swing. Her words pierced deeper than he expected. He set the axe down, brushing snow from his gloves. "You talk too much for someone who almost froze to death." Soraya smiled faintly. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it unsettled him. It was not human, but it carried warmth all the same. Over the next hours, she tried to help him. She struggled with the heavy tools, dropped buckets, and stumbled in the snow. David found himself shaking his head again and again, but strangely, he did not send her back inside. When she fell trying to lift a sack of grain, David sighed and helped her up. Her hands were trembling, but not from cold this time. From effort. She looked at him, her eyes almost apologetic. "I am not strong," she whispered. "You're alive," he replied simply. "That's enough." The word surprised even him. By evening, the two of them sat near the heater again. David ate his usual simple meal of bread and soup. He handed her a bowl. She took it carefully, holding it close like it was treasure. After a long silence, Soraya spoke again. Her voice was softer than before, but steadier. "Why did you let me in?" "You did not have to." David stared into the fire. He did not like questions that made him think. "Because I've seen enough people die in the cold." Soraya's eyes lingered on him. "You lost someone." David's jaw tightened. He did not answer. "You hide in this place," she continued, her voice gentle. "But your heart does not want to be alone." Her words cut too close. David looked at her sharply, but she did not turn away. She held his gaze with a strange mix of sadness and understanding. For the first time in years, David felt seen. Truly seen, and it made him uneasy. The silence stretched again, heavy but not empty. Finally, Soraya whispered, "Thank you. For giving me more than warmth. For giving me a place." David didn't reply. He only nodded once and stood, putting another log into the heater. But inside, something shifted. He had let her in out of pity. He told himself that. But now, watching her eat, watching her fight to help him even when she was weak, he felt something different, something that was not pity, something closer to trust. Yet at the same time, a voice deep inside warned him. Trust is dangerous. Trust can be a blade. He didn't know which voice to believe. As night returned, Soraya lay down near the heater once more. David sat in his chair, the rifle across his knees as always. His eyes closed slowly, but not before drifting toward her one last time. She was a stranger. An alien. A barren woman carrying secrets of a dying race. And yet, his quiet world already felt different with her in it. What he did not know was that the bond forming in silence would soon be tested, for the frozen wind outside was carrying more than snow. It carried footsteps, others following her trail. The bond of trust had begun. But so had the danger. The second night came colder than the first. The wind howled through the valley like a wounded beast, rattling the windows of David's lonely farm. Inside, the heater glowed faintly, keeping the small home alive. David sat in his chair, half asleep, his rifle resting across his knees as always. Soraya lay curled under the blanket, her eyes closed, her breathing soft and steady. For a moment, the silence of the house felt almost peaceful. Then, knock, knock. David's eyes snapped open. He sat up straight, his hands tightening on the rifle. His heart gave a heavy thump. He had heard that sound before, just 2 nights ago. That same slow, weak knock, his breath froze in his throat. Carefully he stood, his boots scraping the floor. The knock came again, louder this time, not weak like Soraya's had been. Knock, knock, knock. Soraya stirred, her silver eyes blinking open. She sat up quickly, her face pale. "No," she whispered. David shot her a sharp look. "What do you mean, no?" But she said nothing more. Her body trembled, her hands gripping the blanket tightly. The knocking grew harder. Whoever stood at the door was not freezing and weak. Whoever it was had strength. David raised his rifle, stepping closer. His voice was steady, but his chest felt tight. "Who's there?" Silence. Then a voice, rough and thin, cut through the night air. "Please, open." We followed. We saw light. David frowned. "We?" He unlocked the door slowly, just enough to peek through the crack, and there they stood. Not one. Not two, but three. 3 alien women standing in the snow. Their skin glowed faintly like Soraya's. Their clothes torn, their bodies thin. Their eyes, huge, glimmering with hunger and fear, stared at him desperately. Soraya gasped behind him. "They found me." David turned his head sharply. "You knew?" She shook her head quickly. "I did not call them, but they are like me. Abandoned, searching. They followed my scent, my trail. They came for hope." The 3 women shivered in the cold, their breaths white in the night air. One of them stepped forward, her knees shaking. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Please, let us in." David's heart hammered. He gripped the rifle tighter. This was not chance. One stranger at his door could be mercy. But 4? 4 was something else. His mind raced. What if it's a trick? What if they mean to take my land? To overwhelm me? He glanced back at Soraya, but her face was full of sorrow, not deceit. "They are like me," she whispered. "Barren, alone, lost. If you turn them away, they will not survive the night." David clenched his jaw. His house was small. His supplies were low. He barely had enough for himself, let alone 1 alien and now 3 more. The women outside stepped closer, but not in aggression. They lowered their heads, their hands open, showing no threat. Their eyes glistened with desperation. David's finger hovered near the trigger. His instincts screamed at him to say no, to shut the door, to keep his world safe, but his heart remembered what it felt like to be cold, hungry, and unwanted. Remembered the war, the camps, the people left behind. His throat tightened. He cursed under his breath, then threw the door open wider. "Get inside. All of you." Before I changed my mind, the 3 women stumbled in, nearly collapsing in the warmth. They huddled together near the heater, clutching each other as if afraid they would vanish if they let go. David closed the door with a heavy slam and locked it tight. His rifle never left his hands. He turned on Soraya, his eyes hard. "You didn't tell me this would happen." Her face dropped. "I didn't know. I swear." David studied her, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. But the weight in the air told him his life had just changed forever. 4 aliens in his home. 4 strangers carrying secrets. 4 mouths he was now responsible for. And outside, the storm raged on, hiding tracks in the snow. Tracks that might not only belong to the desperate, tracks that might belong to hunters. David's quiet life was gone. The strangers had arrived. The small house no longer felt empty. It was crowded now, filled with the sound of breathing that was not David's. 4 alien women huddled near the heater, their thin arms wrapped around themselves, their large silver eyes shining faintly in the dim light. Their voices were quiet, their movements careful, as if afraid they might be thrown back out into the snow at any moment. But David's mind was not quiet. He sat in his chair with the rifle across his lap, watching them with sharp eyes. His chest felt heavy, his hands tense. His home had always been his fortress, his one safe place. Now it felt invaded, fragile, like a door had been opened that could never be shut again. Soraya sat closest to the heater, her face pale and worried. She had not spoken much since the others arrived. She kept glancing at David as if she could feel the storm building inside him. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "Why are you here?" "All of you." "Why my door?" The three newcomers exchanged uneasy looks. One of them, taller than the rest, lowered her head before answering. "We followed her," she said softly, pointing to Soraya. "She found safety. We wanted the same." David narrowed his eyes. "You followed her?" "Through the storm. Across the valley. You found this house, my house." "How?" The woman hesitated. "We can sense." "We feel the warmth of life. We feel hope. We followed it." David's jaw tightened. The answer was strange, too strange. He felt his suspicion coil tighter inside him. "You expect me to believe that?" He snapped. "You all show up at my door by accident? You think I don't see the risk here? 4 of you, 1 of me." The women lowered their heads again, showing no resistance, no anger. But David's eyes remained hard. He had seen too many lies wrapped in soft voices. He had seen too much death to fall for weakness too quickly. Soraya finally spoke, her voice trembling but steady. "They are not soldiers. They are not here to hurt you." David turned to her sharply. "And how do you know? Did you plan this?" Her eyes widened with pain. "No, I swear." "I didn't know they would come." The silence grew heavy. The crackle of the heater was the only sound in the room. David leaned forward, his eyes burning into hers. "You brought them here. Whether you meant to or not, you brought them. And now, if more come, if trouble comes, it'll be at my door." Soraya lowered her gaze, her hands gripping the blanket tightly. She had no words to fight his suspicion. David's mind churned. He imagined waking one night to find them standing over him. He imagined them stealing his supplies, taking his farm, leaving him to die in the cold. Every survival instinct in him screamed, "Don't trust. Don't keep them here," and yet, his eyes betrayed him. He saw their shaking hands. He saw their hollow faces, their thin frames. They looked less like a threat and more like dying birds seeking shelter. Still, fear is louder than pity. David stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. The women flinched at the sound. He walked to the window and stared into the black storm outside. His breath fogged the glass. He spoke without turning. "If anyone else comes knocking, I won't open the door." The words dropped heavy in the air. Behind him, one of the alien women whispered, her voice trembling. "We don't want to harm you. We only want to live." David closed his eyes for a moment. His heart pulled one way, his mind another. He remembered the war. Faces begging for mercy, promises made and broken. He remembered the cold nights when no one had opened the door for him. He clenched his fists. The storm outside howled louder like a warning. Inside, the heater glowed, keeping them alive for now. But trust hung by a thin thread, fragile and ready to break. David did not know yet if he had let in lost souls, or the beginning of his own ruin. The storm raged through the valley that night, carrying snow and silence like a heavy blanket. But David knew better than to trust silence. Silence could hide footsteps. Silence could hide death. He sat in his chair, the rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the window. The 4 alien women huddled near the heater. Their soft whispers in their strange tongue rose and fell like broken music. Soraya sat apart from the others, her face caught between fear and guilt. David did not sleep. He could not. His instincts, sharpened by war and loneliness, whispered to him that the danger had only begun. And then he heard it. Not a knock this time. Not a voice, a sound outside, crunch, snow shifting under weight. His chest tightened. Slowly he stood, his boots silent against the wooden floor. He moved to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to look into the storm. At first he saw nothing but white, then a shadow, tall, thin, moving with purpose, and another. David's breath froze in his throat. Not just shadows, figures. He let the curtain fall quickly, his mind racing. Something was out there, watching. He turned sharply to Soraya. "Who's following you?" Her eyes widened in fear. "No one. Don't lie to me." His voice was hard, colder than the storm outside. "There are shapes moving out there. They didn't just find this house by accident." The 3 other women clutched each other, their faces pale, their eyes shimmering with tears. Soraya stood slowly, her body trembling. "They are not soldiers," she whispered, "but they are worse. David's grip tightened on the rifle. "Explain now," her voice shook. "When our people saw we could not give life, they threw us away. They left us to starve, but some enjoy the hunt. They follow the barren ones. They call us wasted flesh. They take us not for mercy, but for cruelty, for sport." Her words stabbed the air like knives. David's stomach twisted. He knew cruelty well. He had seen men enjoy war not for victory, but for the screams. He thought those days were behind him, but cruelty had found his door again. He looked at the women, fragile, trembling, their hope already fading. Then he looked at the door. Thin wood, a weak lock. It would not hold against hunters. His mind screamed, "Send them out. Protect yourself. Survive alone." But his heart rebelled. If you send them out, you are no better than the men who abandoned you in the war. You are no better than their hunters. The storm outside shifted. Another sound, closer this time, a scrape, a low hiss carried by the wind. David raised his rifle and moved to the door. His pulse thundered in his ears. "They come here. They bleed here," he muttered under his breath. The women stared at him, their eyes wide with both fear and something else. Hope. Soraya stepped forward, her voice urgent. "If they see you protect us, they will not stop. They will come again and again." David turned to her, his jaw tight. "Then let them come. I've been alone too long. Maybe it's time someone remembered what a human heart can do." The heater crackled. The storm screamed, and outside, dark figures moved closer to the lonely farm. The enemy was no longer hidden. The enemy was here. The night was heavy with danger. The storm outside screamed like a beast, but inside the small farmhouse, silence pressed hard against every wall. David stood near the door, rifle in hand, his jaw locked tight. His shadow stretched long in the dim glow of the heater. Behind him, 4 alien women huddled together, fear written in every trembling breath. Soraya whispered softly, almost like a prayer. "They will come. They will not stop." David's eyes stayed fixed on the door. His heart pounded steady, not with fear, but with something sharper. Decision. He remembered the war. He remembered standing beside men who broke, men who ran, men who chose only themselves. He remembered the day he buried his family, the day no one came to help him, and now, here he was. 4 strangers in his home, 4 lives in his hands. He could throw them out, save himself, close the door on their cries like others had closed it on his, or he could stand. The choice clawed at him, survival or sacrifice, coldness or compassion. Then came the sound. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps in the snow. Slow, deliberate, surrounding the house. The women gasped, clutching each other tighter. Soraya's silver eyes met David's, wide with both terror and desperate hope. David's grip tightened on the rifle. His voice was steady when he spoke, but inside fire burned. "Stay here. Whatever happens, don't open that door." Soraya shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "They will kill you." David gave a hard smile, bitter but alive. "They can try." The first strike came. Bang! A heavy blow against the door. The thin wood shook under the force. Another strike followed, then another. The lock rattled, the hinges groaned. The women cried out softly, but David stood tall, his feet planted firm. For years he had been a man running from life, running from loss. But not tonight. Tonight he would not run. The door burst open, snow blasting inside, carrying with it dark figures with cruel eyes. Their tall, thin forms twisted in the stormlight, weapons glinting in their hands. David raised his rifle and fired. The shot thundered through the small house, shaking the walls. One of the hunters fell, the others hissed in rage. The women screamed, but David did not move back. He stepped forward instead, placing himself between the hunters and the helpless. Another shot. Another fall. His ears rang, his chest burned, but his eyes blazed with something the hunters had never seen before. Not fear. Defiance. He roared into the storm, his voice carrying through wind and snow. "You want them? You go through me first." For a moment, the hunters froze. They had seen weakness before. They had seen prey beg, cry, surrender. But this was different. This was human. David's heart thundered. Every memory of pain, every scar of loss, every ounce of loneliness turned into fuel. He was one man, yes, but he was more than that. He was a wall, a shield, a promise. Behind him, Soraya whispered, her voice breaking. "Human heart, the battle was chaos. The storm roared, gunfire cracked, and the hunter screamed. David fought like a man with nothing left to lose and yet everything to protect. His body ached, his breath burned, but he did not fall. When silence finally returned, the snow outside was red, and the hunters lay scattered in the storm. David stood in the doorway, chest heaving, smoke curling from his rifle. His arms trembled, but his legs held. The women stared at him in awe, tears streaming down their faces. For them, he was no longer just a farmer, no longer just a man with scars. He was their protector. David looked back at them, his voice rough but firm. "You stay here. This is your home now. No one throws you out again. Not while I'm breathing." The heater glowed, casting warm light across their faces. For the first time, the barren women felt something they had never felt before. Safety. And for the first time in years, David felt something too. Not silence, not emptiness, but life. The human had chosen, and in his choice, he reminded the galaxy of a truth forgotten. A human heart once opened could warm even the coldest night.